Everyone, we're going to get started in 1 minute. So if you can make your way back to your cameras. Okay, Sherry, whenever you're ready.
Okay, ready to go. Hello and welcome to day 3 of our 5-day webinar series called Life Made Accessible, Accessing the Future in honor of National Accessibility Week, which takes place from May 31st to June 4th. Our event is an opportunity to see into the lives being presented to you. We hope it will give better understanding of the paths that some people with disabilities need to take. With understanding, we hope it will lead to a world more accessible. My name is Sherry Roberts, and I work for the Independent Living Center as a Community Resource Coordinator. And today I am your host. Today's webinar will look at allyship in the workplace. But before we begin, just a couple of notes. The spirit of this event is an opportunity for learning. Our panelists will be sharing personal experiences and perspectives. This is their story. They do not speak on behalf of all individuals living with a disability. We encourage you to comment and ask questions to our panelists throughout the webinar using the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. The last 10 to 15 minutes of our time together will be dedicated to answering some of your questions. Please remember to be appropriate and courteous. We are pleased to provide both CART transcription and interpretation services for today's webinar. To enable closed captioning, click on the closed caption button on the bottom of the Zoom window and then choose subtitles. Just a reminder to please speak slowly and clearly so that our interpreters can capture all of your messages. To begin, I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Dan Lajoie. Dan is a lifelong advocate for accessibility and inclusion in our community. In his role as the Virtual Program and Community Resource Coordinator with the Independent Living Center of Waterloo Region, Dan helps to connect individuals with disabilities to vital community resources and facilitate peer connections through educational and recreational programs. Dan is also a private accessibility consultant, specializing in corporate accessible website and document remediation. In his spare time, Dan is an active community volunteer and a proud father of 2. Over to you, Dan.
Why, thank you, Sherry, and welcome everyone. What does it mean to be an ally in the workplace? How can you help support people with disabilities and their goal to create a diverse and equitable work environment? Today, we look at the power of allyship at work and learn about its value from those who actively support these relationships. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview about how our webinar will go today. I'm going to introduce our 2 amazing panelists in turn, at which point they're going to provide some opening remarks. And when they're done with their little bit, we are going to sort of engage in some dialogue and maybe a little bit of back and forth and explore some of the issues of allyship at work. So first, I'd like to start by introducing our first panelist, Jamie Burton. Jamie is co-owner and vice president of Dolphin Digital Technologies. Currently seconded to the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work as their Chief Business Development Officer. She is also the founder of Dolphin Disabilities Mentoring Day. Jamie is a business leader for employment of people with disabilities. Her focus is to develop business solutions which ensure the future of work includes diversity and inclusion as a part of its employment plan for an enhanced workforce. Jamie, over to you. Oh, you're on mute, Jamie.
I knew that was going to happen. Thanks so much, Dan. I really appreciate this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here, and especially talking about something that obviously is very special to me. But first, I'd like to just describe myself. I am a mature white woman who has gone a long time without a haircut or the renewal of my color, but it is currently gray blonde, and I'm wearing glasses. I'm also wearing a red t-shirt. This is not typical of what I would wear when asked to speak in front of esteemed colleagues. However, it is Red Shirt Day, a day of action for accessibility and inclusion. And I'm proud to be wearing a red shirt to represent my belief in working together to solve a problem. And it kind of aligns itself nicely with our topic for today. Dan, if you would kindly start the slide deck, please. Disability and allyship. I will be honest with you when I say that for me, the concept of being given a title for something comes with it a very strong responsibility. So I tend to not reject, but be cautious of titles being given. But I do think that more importantly than being called an ally, there is an understanding of what it means to be one. On this slide, we see three people discussing around a computer. This is something that we've not had opportunity to do much lately. It was back to the initial slide, please, Dan, thanks. And so when I reflect on allyship in the workplace, it's important to recognize that we collect and convene in many different ways. And so from the start, and that's why it's on the front page, I want to show you that my role in allyship for people with disability is about accessibility in the workplace, employment for people with disabilities. So you will note A11Y actually says ally, but it's also the short form on social media for accessibility, just in case you didn't know. So where do we start? We start from the top. What are we doing? Where are we going? When are we going to take action? How do we take action? I'm here to tell you the most important thing is to be public and claim your goal. Help educate by encouraging peer-to-peer engagement to foster a sense of belonging. And along the way, there must be continuous improvement. But let's talk about those things in a little more detail. Next slide, please. Everything comes down to perspective. On one half of this slide, we see someone with their arms raised standing on a deserted island in the middle of a body of water underneath a tree, looking a little bit perhaps hungry. And their arms are raised in recognition that they see someone off in the distance, perhaps thinking that this is the rescue boat. The second picture is the exact same from a different perspective. It is someone in a small boat with their arm raised, looking at the person on the island, waving their arms, and they are saying, land. Someone looking to be rescued, or are they both looking to be rescued? The truth of the matter is I find this slide very compelling because it does demonstrate the power of perspective. And perspective is critical to be able to have a mindset change. It's not about picking up a few pointers here and there. It's actually about seeing things in a new way. How do we change our way of mind? Well, from my perspective, it's about starting with some specific habits. Next slide, please. First of all, I am someone who is a strong proponent for inclusive language. I am very particular about the words that I use, the words that I tell other people that have meaning, and they should be cautious of using, in that we don't know how someone else will receive it. They might have a different meaning than we intend, and intention is genuinely important. But how do we navigate such a difficult topic if we're going to be made to feel uncomfortable, perhaps that we are saying something wrong? In this picture, there is someone demonstrating what I have felt many times. What if I say the wrong thing, is the quote. Well, I've learned, don't worry. Someone will tell you that's not appropriate. Or in this case, it's not appropriate. We'll learn from it and then move on. The bigger challenge is, and I will challenge all of you, do you use the word disabled like it's an insult? A bad word? If that's what you're projecting in any word that you use, then you have to reconsider your attitude first and foremost. We're fortunate to have someone like Stella Young give us a quote that positions this a little bit differently. Disability doesn't make you exceptional, but questioning what you think you know about it does. And the picture is of Stella with beautiful red polka dot shoes sitting in her wheelchair. She's someone who I think is an incredible ally and certainly has an incredible story to share with us. So if her view is that talking about disability and questioning what you know about it is that important, I wonder what others think. How do we get in the context of being able to understand how important it is that we recognize the differences in each other and the value of each other so that we have an equitable terms of reference, especially in the workplace? My job has been very unique. As a vice president of Dolphin, we've designed technology that allows us to do some pretty cool things. And we showcase that technology by putting a focus on hiring people with disabilities because we wanted to demonstrate that technology can facilitate a level playing ground and that there's many people that are not being hired that have incredible skill sets, talents, knowledge, experience, who are not getting hired. Back in 2008, when we began our journey, no one was talking about it. Today, it's become quite a topic. And I have found myself being considered an agitator. I'll take that. An advocate, proud of that. And now it seems I'm called an ally, and I will happily accept that. But I kind of see myself like the dirt in an oyster shell that becomes the pearl. I'm the person who just implants a thought, a word, a topic, so that there is secreted around it this layer of, in the oyster's case, something called nacre. But in our case, thoughtfulness, a mindfulness, an awareness that helps to create the pearl that we are all seeking. I believe that that pearl is accessibility, and that accessibility is our collective opportunity. Next slide, please, Dan. In the past, I believe that people have had to respond and adapt to the world around them. The world has created all of our barriers. And I believe in the future, the world's going to adapt to us. I remember sitting in the executive boardroom with Dolphin team and talking about this idea that we had, where one day you would walk into a room and you would put your phone into, let's call it a platform, and that the room would adjust to all of the parameters that appeal to you, the user, the lighting, the music, the temperature, perhaps the blinds. Perhaps it would be that it tells you a message. Perhaps that a delivery has been made. Some of you are starting to clue in and thinking of your devices at home, Google and such. For me, my thoughtfulness in that area has always been one step more. What if we have an idea to innovate that can allow us to facilitate greater inclusion, that will ensure that accessibility is at the start of our design and that it's not kind of bolted on at the end? In this picture, we have two mentees and a mentor from Shopify from Disabilities Mentoring Day. They're learning from each other how important accessibility is in the design of specific software platforms. But it's also the design in other products. Next slide, please. When we look at the picture in front of us, we see a gentleman using an exoskeleton to assist with mobility. We see a woman using an exoskeleton to assist in her job, provides back support, and allows her to have a component of a tool that she's using raised at a certain level. The gentleman who's using it for mobility has a very specific purpose for himself. But the purpose for himself does not limit to him. Clearly in this picture, there's a demonstration of how ensuring that we're always thinking about how to incorporate design elements into the greater needs and purposes that makes it a better design. In this case, the company is Canova and Quanzer, who got together to share their IP, their intellectual property, in a way that benefited both of them to design a better product. And that's what I'm talking about. Collaboration in any form is really the only way that we can figure out how to do better. In the next slide, you will see that it is very much about taking pieces of the puzzle and putting them together in such a way that we have dialogue, proactive engagement, and mutual problem solving. This is the way of the future, to tackle big challenging problems through innovative collaboration with many different stakeholders. I'm actually not too fond of the word stakeholders. Remember, I am pretty particular. In this case, I'll be all right with it. But I challenge you when you think about using that word. Does that indicate someone outside looking in? Someone other than who this is for? When we use words in terms of reference in the workplace, we can often start to make others feel like they either have to identify the way that we're telling them to, or not at all. So as a community builder, looking to have the opportunity to share ideals, to recognize that we are a mixture of demographics, social geographic impactors, influences of race and beliefs, how do we get together to really work together as allies? I would suggest that we identify from the top and from the start what we're looking to fix. What's wrong? Find something specific that you can collectively communicate. And then connect around shared experiences. There is nothing more powerful in my experience than asking someone who has lived through something, who's had to learn how to do something, what their values were from learning those lessons, what they have experienced, what they've had to endure, and sometimes what they've been subjected to. Establish some norms, create a pathway to belonging, because that's going to ensure that everyone has a role in building it together. Be confident, because what you want to do is make everyone move from observer to an active participant. In the workplace, there's a number of things that we can be aware of. The next number of slides will show us some workplace adjustments that if we don't use ourselves, we can be aware and mindful of encouraging others to know that they are available for us to use, such as an ergonomic workstation. Here we have a woman who's sitting on a Pilates ball. I myself have used one for years. The next is adaptive software. How many of us struggle with the challenges of implementing and using a software that wasn't meant to be installed with another software, and then that software conflicts with another software? Can you imagine putting an accessible layer over top? Why is it we don't demand that software is created accessible from the start? It's one of the reasons why I've supported Microsoft for so long. Sure, they have work to do, but they have always been working to make a better product for everyone. And that's why I continue to share the products that they develop and deliver. In the next picture, we can see something called flexible schedules. It's something that we've all become very familiar with these past few days, months, even a year. How flexible are we really? Well, now it seems we can be flexible. And so are we mindful in those we supervise, those we manage? There's a willingness to figure it out that comes from seeking solutions. The next is enlarged text. Are we familiar with the features in our software that we're telling our employees to use? Are we familiar with products well enough that when we see someone struggling, we can say, hey, did you know that you can do this and that it will remember that feature and you don't have to do it every time you log in? Do we share collective information so that we're empowering each other to feel like they belong, to be part of something, not that we're singling somebody out because they need to do things differently? Noise canceling HEMFOs are one of the things that I talk about often because I've heard from many employers that they require a doctor's note. I can understand safety considerations. I can certainly appreciate that many people do like to point out differences or why don't I get one? I will challenge any employer that says, if I get a better employee from the fact that they have noise canceling headphones on, I'm probably going to go out and purchase them. I'm going to provide them, because that's how we establish a ground of ensuring that our employees, the people that we work with, our colleagues, our peers, have what they need to succeed. Signage for accessible washrooms. Most people don't notice them. It's something that I challenge my employees with all of the time. Do you know where they are? If we are renting or using a facility, have we confirmed it's accessible? Have we confirmed that there's an accessible washroom? It might not be in your everyday thinking, but I'm telling you it should be. Acknowledging the littlest details ensures that we are respecting individuals in every way, not just in the ones that are easy to think of and easy to solve, but in all elements of being a human being. And lastly, remote work. We've all experienced aspects of that recently, I'm sure. And some of us have shined with the opportunity. And some of us, the social distancing doesn't feel so good. We're not thriving. We're not doing so well. In this picture, there's a gentleman with 2 kids hanging off him while he looks at his computer. That's been most of our work, I'm sure, in the last while. There's not one of us that hasn't apologized for eating in front of the camera or talking to a dog or cat that just jumped up on the table. But that's life. Why do we treat it like something's wrong? And that's my point. It's our responsibility to ensure that we're connecting with each other, that we're delivering opportunities to work together to make it better for all of us, to inspire change, and to help transform us from a state where things were really barriered, where attitudinal barriers were our biggest problem, to a place where we are collectively working together and where we have the ability and opportunity to showcase skills and make it an equitable advantage. Let's not make any assumptions. For our final slide, we have 2 gentlemen talking. One is a mentee, and one is a mentor from Dolphin Disabilities Mentoring Day. I won't tell you who's who, because you can't tell. They are casually speaking, leaning against a windowsill, looking like they're having a great time. This is my approach to integrated inclusion, ensuring that it's systemic in everything that I do, in everything that I practice, because I embrace disability. It is not a bad word. It is not a bad thing. And in fact, I've come to understand that how we have behaved in the past is holding us all back from being better in the future. I embed accessibility in everything that I do. I don't bolt it on as an afterthought, and I encourage others to do so. Using disruptive innovation, we can change what's possible. Better products, better processes and services, and a better future. And as Sherry said at the beginning, it's really important here to recognize that it's not about making assumptions about personal experiences or any one individual or employer. We recognize the value of hearing about a personal connection to the subject and then gaining a better understanding of barriers, of disability, of accessibility, because those barriers have to be removed so that we can achieve gainful employment. And it is the means for success. COVID has helped us become more aware of everyone's needs. Our collective experiences have changed and have resulted in a broader appreciation for what is needed by any one individual. Imagine that lesson from COVID. Because one thing I know for sure, in my experience, my perspective, and certainly those messages that I've heard from others, the only way to do this, the only way to ensure accessibility and a brighter future for all of us is together with the strengths of our differences and unique perspectives, with diversity and inclusion and accessibility from the start, will achieve our greatest results. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jamie. That was very good. And my apologies for not being the best slide transitioner.
You did great, don't worry.
Bit of a short start. That's great. Thank you so much, Jamie. Our next panelist is Megan Murray. Now, Megan currently works as an employment consultant for Canadian Hearing Services. She grew up in Oshawa, Ontario, with the dream of one day becoming a police officer. She went to Durham College for Police Foundations, where she met her husband, She then continued her education and worked many different jobs, including a child and youth worker and as a personal trainer, among other jobs. During her university career, she started to lose her hearing, which changed her life and career path. Now, working for CHS, she can help people, be around people who understand her, and get the experience to understand what accessibility really means. In her free time, she enjoys spending time with her animals and family, strength training, trying new foods, and being outdoors. Thank you, Megan, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the introduction. I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to talk for the next 5 to 7 minutes, mostly about myself. As stated, I did go to school to be a police officer. I went and I did 2 years of police foundations at Durham College. I then did a graduate certificate in youth corrections and interventions with Durham College as well. And then I went on to get my BA in criminology at the University of Ontario Institute of Technology, which I believe now is called Ontario Tech University. And during this time, I did go through a lot of different career transitions. And when I started to lose my hearing, I didn't really know what to do at that point. I was really lost. I didn't have anybody in my life who had hearing loss or had a disability of any kind that I was aware of. And so I wasn't really educated at that point. You know, where do I go and what do I do and who's there to support me? And so I didn't really know what to do for work. And so I tried a couple of different things. I was a child and youth worker, like you had said. I was a personal trainer. At one point, I tried to go more into an HR role because I thought that somebody with hearing loss couldn't possibly do most of the jobs that I wanted to do. I went to be a police officer specifically because the job is very active. You're out in the community, you're helping people, you're changing things. And so it was a very big, disappointing time for me because, what I thought was my dream job was sort of just gone and I didn't really know what to do. So I went and I applied to a very fancy gym and I applied to be I can't remember the exact name of the role at this time, but it was a manager of member services, I believe. And the day I started, I walked into the gym and they had music playing in the background and phones ringing and people were walking around everywhere and there was a restaurant right beside the desk. And I just remember feeling lost because I couldn't hear anything. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to try to get through it. And, at that point, it was a struggle for me. And so I had to answer the phone one day. And I remember this client just kept telling me how stupid I was because I couldn't hear what he was saying on the phone. And my heart just broke because I believe that I'm very smart, but this person is perceiving me as something very different because of the communication barrier. And I went to the manager, or my manager at the time, and I said to her, I can do everything. I will take on extra jobs. I will work extra hard if you could just have somebody answer the phone for me. And I remember her saying to me that we all have to do our part. So no, you have to answer the phone as well because we're a team environment. And I quit that day and I went home and I cried a lot because I felt like just a failure because, I spent so long going to school and so much money for a career that I couldn't get. And I just felt so lost. And then one day, I don't even know how I came upon CHS, Canadian Hearing Services. And I just remember thinking, like, I just need help. I just need someone to help me. And I actually went to CHS as a client. And the employment services there at the time, who's still there and amazing if he's watching, he looked at my resume and was shocked that I didn't have a job. And I just remember that day so well because it just gave me so much hope that I can get out there, and so much hope that, you know, there's accessibility for me to live a regular life that I wasn't really used to at that point, because I had grown up hearing that it was still such a big change for me. And, you know, we went through the process together, and it just so happened that my job became available and I applied for it and I got it. And now I have the ability to do what he did for me, for other people. And it's just the best feeling. I love being able to go in and help solve problems and make people feel like they're involved and part of either the team that they're working with or with me, because I can relate to these clients. I've had the same struggles that they have, and, you know, I have the knowledge now that, you know, they can be a part of everything. They don't have to have a specific job for somebody who's deaf or hard of hearing. There's accessibility options for them to be able to do the jobs that they want. And it's such a good feeling to be able to help people do that, and to educate people who don't know about all of the different accessibility options that we have. You know, there's such a limited knowledge out there that when I talk to employers, it's like the first time they're hearing what I'm saying. And it's a toss-up, right? Like, I love being able to share my knowledge, but at the same time, it's also sad that people don't have this knowledge readily available to them, or they don't already know or are educated in these options. So, you know, being an ally in the workplace is such a big opportunity for everybody at every level, because this is how, you know, you come full circle. This is where you educate employers and teammates, and then, you know, they go out into the world and they share this experience with everybody. And that's how, you know, we can sort of do this together, right? Through education, through stories, through, you know, research. These things, all these things matter. And I'm just excited to be part of it. So that's me.
Well, that's awesome, Megan. Thank you so much. I'm actually, if I can, I would like to sort of comment on something you said. And it occurred to me that sometimes there's a continuity of allyship, right? So you speak of having support from allies when you were making your journey, and now becoming an ally yourself, right, to help others. But it doesn't end there, right? You continue to receive support from your community, from your colleagues, right? And as you do, you continue to have a greater depth of knowledge to help support others. So I think that was really cool. And as a person with a disability myself, doing similar work, I could say that my experience is similar, right? Having received support and seeing the value of that support, but then adding my own story and my own context to help support others. So that was really cool. And I thank you both. What amazing stories, what amazing perspectives. So I thought now we've got, about 10 minutes left. I thought maybe we could talk a little bit. I've got a few questions I wrote down. So I'm gonna read them out. And if either one of you wants to respond, or both of you, or we can have a dialogue. And so the first one I think of is when I think of allyship, right? And the word is a little bit ambiguous in what it means, but how is allyship best served for employment? Would it be through business practices or supported through legislation and programming? And could you give me maybe some examples or scenarios that would support either case? Yep, go ahead,
Well,
Megan.
I can
Go ahead.
speak on this first one. I think both are equally important. There needs to be legislation to promote work level obligations and consequences. But we also need to be able to have the business practice side of things to ensure follow through, to ensure the empathy, the proper hiring, the accommodation practices. But there should be responsibility at every level. Co-workers, boss management, legislation, government, everything. There should be responsibility at every level. You need legislation to get in the door, and you need business practice to help you stay there, more or less, right? So
That's
I
a
think
great way of putting it. Yeah.
both are equally important.
Jamie, do you have any comments to add?
Yeah, I love that answer. I think that was well summed up. Megan, thanks for that. I think I might use that and quote you on that. But I agree. I think it is about both, and more importantly, the aspect that Megan pointed to of it's about all and everywhere. Everyone has a responsibility and a role. And I think I alluded to that in what I was saying, where this is a community engagement piece. So it's understanding that every aspect of this affects us all, whether it's personally or a loved one or a family member, or it might be one day, or it might be that there is a barrier that we can have an impact on. The critical piece with legislation is that it's not wielded in a way that implies then the solutions are understood, or the implementation is understood, or the responsibility is understood. To just put legislation there, it requires an education. And I think the best thing that I've experienced with this is understanding how to show business the value of implementing it. And so we build business solutions that recognizes how do we showcase accessibility features as improving the model. So we've been awarded at Dolphin for our technical solutions, and I believe largely in part by the fact that it was a premium design. We do premium designs because we ensure that everyone can use the application or the product or the service. And I think that's it. It's not just telling business, you have to. Yeah, unfortunately, we have to say that. It's a sad thing to say, but it's also recognize the value of the relationship when you're explaining to them that there's a need. It's gotten to this point. This is what you have to do. It's then showing them the ways, the means, and the methods to be able to do that. And it's something that I've spent a lot of time designing a number of solutions to help business recognize their opportunity, not just their responsibility, their opportunity in inclusive design.
Yeah, Megan, I agree. I really love your concept of legislation to get you in the door and business model to keep you there. I think that's really spot on. And Jamie, I mean, you and I have known each other for a long time, and I can say that, I know that your passion for developing good product is what drives your force. You're not just looking to, superficially develop a way to employ persons with disabilities. You are highlighting the expertise and experience of those you employ to develop a better product. So in both cases, great job for both. So Jamie, you touched on it a little bit earlier, sort of the COVID reality, the impact that it's had on our employment landscape. And I don't want to sort of rehash some of the things that you said, but, as we look to the future, right? I mean, I think the landscape will continue to evolve. Firstly, we're not through COVID just yet. And secondly, I think that the lessons we've learned will change the workforce of the future. So what advice can we give employers that will help them to remain flexible and considerate of our diverse workplace?
It's a great question. I have so many thoughts going through my mind, so I'm just trying to position a few of them because you started to see me smile because I'm so excited about some of the examples we now have to point to. Previous to COVID, sometimes it's difficult to identify a purpose of within the business so that you can demonstrate that there's a story there that resonates with them. So B2B connection is the most important piece in all of this, and that's why allyship in the workplace itself, amongst other businesses as well, is the most critical piece. And so you had to figure out, a sector-specific story or an identified element within the business process to be able to speak to so that there'd be recognition. Now we have COVID. Everyone experienced COVID. What was is no longer now. And I mean that specifically with respect to that statement that I made about it's helped us become individualized in our focus. We've seen the impact on all. So when you can position something where typically the response has been, well, that's only for some people. That's what, for one person, what are you talking? We don't have to do that. And now the understanding is that by building a better model, by having a solution where we think about everyone and their needs to participate and be able to do their work, we actually recognize, wait a second, it might be there's a variable, or it might be that it's different in this case, in this part of the work, and somebody else needs another tool in that part of the work, but we all need things to achieve. How many of us were literally had the door closed at the office and told to work from home and went, with what? You need tools to be able to do productive work, to feel that you're part of something bigger than yourself, to be engaged, to communicate with. We're not all, clearly I'm not a Zoom expert because I didn't get the unmute button right, but most of us are much more comfortable using technology to communicate, whereas many of us had never done that before. I think of examples like that where we can show business. It used to be that you said no one can work from home. It wasn't acceptable. And yet everyone has now worked from home in that context. And let's look what our learning and understanding of that situation was. Was it that everyone required something differently to succeed? Potentially, but in the end, they could work. And when we talk about things and put them into context of what makes the most sense, cost is always a consideration. I was very fortunate in the last year to work on a project called AIM, Accommodation and Inclusion Management with CCRW, where we developed an entire premise of ensuring that businesses had what they needed to accommodate any request or adjustment in the workplace, because we knew that they were struggling. And to alleviate that pressure, first of all, the cost, second of all, of the education, training, and understanding of what was important for that employee, the differences in you can't collect it. You can't feel it because it's so vast. It's hugely impactful when it becomes relative, when the perspective changed. I'm a firm believer that once our perspective changes, we never go back. And so it's how do we incorporate the learnings of COVID, the understanding that there were sectors that were many jobs for people with disabilities were wiped out. And so now we're looking at how do we restructure? How do we figure out how to find those opportunities the same? Is it different? What do we need to do? And I think the underlying theme in all of that is when we initially were asked to work differently, whatever that looked like, whether it was PPEs or working from home, we felt like we were in a spacesuit on a beach. That's the best analogy that I can come up with. We could breathe, we could move kind of, but we couldn't really get comfortable. In fact, we were very uncomfortable. But if we put the context of a spacesuit on and the beach is Mars, suddenly we feel like we're protected, we're safe, we have what we need to succeed. That's the model that I choose to point out to businesses when they're looking to figure things out. It's how you look at it. Do you look at it like it's a problem and something that's not meant to really fit? Or do you look like it, hey, this is good for everyone, let's figure this out?
It's great, Jamie. Thank you. There's so many.
I have something to add quick.
Absolutely, of course.
So if I could give an employer just a quick little piece of advice, it would just be, be flexible, be open, and ask a lot of questions, because accommodations are never set in stone and they differentiate between every single person. So what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for the other. And, with COVID happening and with working from home and working at a distance, it has helped a lot of people. But I can tell you that my clients have suffered a lot during this pandemic, with the masks and not being able to communicate or get verbal cues, or, being able to apply for jobs properly. And a lot of my clients aren't very well, they don't know technology very well. So doing a lot of this stuff online is very hard for them. And me not being able to be in person to help them has definitely impacted their job search, in addition to the people who don't even want to apply for jobs now, because they're afraid. They can't communicate with the masks, and a lot of people don't have patience to work through writing on paper, if people will even allow that, because a lot of people don't like being close enough now to write on paper. And then you have to have apps and everything. So there really needs to be a lot of patience and flexibility and, education, right? But all of these things are very important.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. I think that your comments speak to something we touched on earlier, and that is the difference of experience, right? No one individual experiences things in the same way. No individual has the same needs when it comes to accessibility. And I think that, that's part of that allyship piece, right? How do we connect with the individuals and then find out what's needed instead of sort of blanket statements. I want to thank you both. I see that our host has turned on her camera, and that is typically the cue for we're running out of time. Let's move into the audience questions. Before we do that, I want to thank you both again. I'm really inspired by the work that both of you do, and inspired by the words that you shared with us today. So thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was such a wonderful conversation. We do have a couple of questions if you ladies are right with that. So to start, the first one was, I enjoy the word ally, but how do I promote it to the people I know? How do I get my colleagues, friends, and families to become allies? I'm not sure who wants to take that one, but
I can start with it because
Sure.
I kind of connect with that statement. I do like the word ally, but I told Dan, I said, I've never talked to it before or really even thought myself as an ally, and no one had ever called me that. So it was a unique experience for me to position my thinking around the use of that word and how would I advocate that to others. I think the best answer is going back to what Megan said about knowing that, and what we've all alluded to, with knowing that there's no two that are the same. This is an individual approach. I don't think it's necessarily the terminology that's important here. Yeah, yes, if there's an understanding, then sure, use that. But the most important thing here is talk about it. That's part of that question. How do I talk about it? Just talk about it. Just talk about the, some of the struggles you've experienced personally, or that you've noticed someone else experience, and saying, why is it that we continue to consider it accessible, or consider that accessibility is not an essential tool, that it should be built into? Why is it that we have public buildings being built without accessibility features? Why is it the government's funding things that have no mention of accessibility built in? Those conversations are, however they are formulated or however they happen around the table or walking along, if you see something, talk about it. And that's the only way that we're really going to start to feel comfortable about getting uncomfortable enough to make change happen.
Awesome. Megan, did you have anything to add to that, or?
Sorry, I'm just waiting for Cart to catch up. So sometimes
Yeah,
there's a bit of a pause between question and answer.
no problem.
Honestly, she did a great job. Jamie did a great job, right? It's just about asking questions. Ask questions, and if you see something you feel is wrong, speak up. Don't just let it happen because you don't really know what to say, right?
Yeah, awesome advice. That's wonderful. Okay, next, I think we have time for one or two more questions. So my employer does the best they can, but they don't know a lot about accessibility in the workplace. Is there somewhere they can find information or somebody they can work with to become allies? So a bit of a resource question.
So I can take this one, sorry. Hand raised. Honestly, I just think it's about looking for resources, right? You can look anywhere, look on the internet, you can find CHS, you can find CCRW, you can find those places where you can ask questions. You can, get support from those people. I know that part of my job is to support employers, right? It's not just a client-based position. If employers contact me, part of my job is to go and do workplace accommodation assessments and accessibility assessments and talks and awareness training, and these things are available to them. You just have to search, right? It's just part of the educational piece.
Great. Jamie, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Megan. Exactly. It is about reaching out and connecting to the community organizations. That's our role. So currently, you know, we can name, of course, CHS and CCRW and many others, and KW has a role in the community, and ILC has a role in it. Like, there's all different elements and aspects, and all of them are, I consider, a resource, because first and foremost, they serve the people who have the answers. So engage and ensure that the lived experience is part of the conversation, part of the solution that you're designing as business. But I think that one of the biggest challenges is convening that conversation that is a B2B connection. It's one of the reasons why Dolphin Disabilities Mentoring Day expanded across Canada so quickly, is because there was this aspect of having that opportunity to talk to somebody else in a role in another company to find out, how do you do it? What are you doing that's working? What didn't work? Why did you do that? And so our job as resource facilities is to showcase those best practices, to recognize what's working well, and to help them share their story with others, so that another business, albeit, you know, small, medium, large, doesn't matter, if there's something in there that they can resonate with and connect with and make it so that it feels like something they can do, that's the only way that's going to change it. We can tell them that they have to, we can even tell them how to, but unless there's a moment where they can identify something that makes sense to their context, it's very difficult. Because remember, every single employee, much like you and I, have a job to do every day. So unless it's built into the job description or as an element of their everyday capacity piece, it's very difficult to approach sourcing information. And as someone who, way back in 2007, when I started looking at how to design a project to employ people with disabilities, knows, understands, experienced the full journey, there was nothing more difficult in my entire career than when I first started looking for answers. So knowing that is one of the reasons why I now am such a strong advocate and sharing stories and making sure there's opportunities for people to connect and showcase the resources and develop better resources, so that it has an actual implementation ability within the workplace. And it's not just somebody saying something, it's actually someone who's done it.
That's awesome. Perfect. Okay, well, I think we've run out of time. Thank you so much for your participation today. We'd like to invite all of you to join us for the remainder of the week by visiting the registration page available on the City of Kitchener or the City of Cambridge websites. Tomorrow, our speakers will talk on how to communicate with accessibility in mind. And on Friday, we're going to talk about the future of accessibility in technology. So many thanks to our organizing committee organizations, including the Independent Living Center of Waterloo Region, CNIB Foundation, CHS, Canadian Hearing Services, Community Support Connections, KW Accessibility, Bridges to Belonging, KW Habilitation, and the cities of Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge, who contributed towards our closed captioning and video relay service and transcription services. I'd also like to thank all of our panelists and our moderator for making today's webinar such a great success. In a moment, a very short poll will appear on your screen. If you can please take a moment to answer a couple of questions about today's event before leaving the webinar, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much and have a fabulous day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ryan.